going to talk about our extra point field goal situations here. Extra point field goal usually falls into one of those categories where people either take a very conservative vanilla approach to it and they run the team out there and try to make the kick, or they're very unconventional, may muddle, may or run the swinging gate or whatever you want to call it, come out in some kind of formation offensively and then shift to a kick or go for two a lot. You see some of both of those. So I think as an extra point field goal team, you got to determine which one of those you're going to be first before you can then work the situations. Because if you're going to be a team that does a lot of different fakes, tricks, whatever, then the number of situations tremendously grows in that scenario. So, but if we're going to talk more about just conventional extra point teams or field goal teams and what situations you would need to practice or go through or make sure your team understood moving into the season. So one of the easiest ones is what we called fire, which is just a bad snap. The holder missed the hold. Something happened that allowed the kick to not get off. We didn't even get the kick off. When that happened, we obviously had made a fire call. We scrambled. We had our ends or our wings or both run routes. We tried to still throw the ball. One of the key things to remember in this scenario is, make sure those linemen understand that when you make that fire call, they've got to stay where they are. We can't just, have a great play where you have a bad snap and the holder runs around and throws it down the field and then you got linemen downfield because they didn't really understand what was happening. So have some plan. Ours was always a pass like that, but you need to have some kind of plan for a fire call, bad snap, whatever. Don't let that be the end of the play. Be able to maybe work your way out of it because it's very likely that one of those receivers is wide open. It's just a matter of if you can relax, pick the football up, and throw it to them. But if you get a bad snap or a missed hold, that's something we would work weekly, what we were going to do in that scenario. A long field goal, this is a tough one. I went to Alabama, so we had to practice this for years. But then in the Iron Bowl, we had the kick six from this. But if you have a long field goal, you got to be prepared to cover. You got to talk to the guys about what they can do. They can, in high school for us, if the ball goes past the goal line, they wouldn't let you run it back. In college and NFL, it has to go out of the end zone. So that's a little bit of an advantage in high school. But if you get a long field goal and they put somebody back, you better make sure your guys understand they're going to have to fan out and cover almost like a punt team after the ball's kicked. And, the problem with extra point field goal covering is a lot of times the size and the athleticism and skill set of what you would ask those guys to do is not what you would ask your guys running down on punt to do. So it's a bigger group of guys. It's usually a lesser athletic group of guys in some cases, but they're going to have to find a way to run down there and make a tackle if your guy doesn't kick it out into the end zone and they can return it. So that's something that doesn't happen often in high school ball, but it is something that warrants going over at least some point with your team. Next thing is understanding how the blocks work behind the line and in front of the line. If we block a field goal or we get a field goal blocked, I guess in this case, we're talking about extra point field goal. If we get a field goal blocked and the ball stays behind the line of scrimmage, we'll lose possession basically no matter what. If we get a field goal block that rolls forward and they touch it, then it can be a live ball and a fumble and things like that. So, something to work there. Not scenarios you see too often. The referees usually help you with that as it happens in high school ball, but something to go over. Last chance field goals, we don't quite get as many of these as, college and NFL now. I feel like most games are coming down to the wire. There are games where, field goals are big. Last-minute field goal happens all the time. We didn't have a ton of those in high school. Experienced a few of them on both ways, extra point and kick block. But for the most part, the game's decided before that point. But if you do find yourself in a last-minute field goal situation, and in high school it may happen in overtime more than normal. But if you find yourself with the team driving, you need to ask yourself, do they have a timeout? Do they not have a timeout? Because the situations change on that team. If they have a timeout, then as far as your extra point field goal team, this be your field goal team in this case, it's not really much different. If you have a timeout, until we use that last timeout, one would have to assume we're going to use it or make sure the clock stopped when we run our field goal team out there to try to win the game. If you don't have a timeout, then that changes the mentality. The extra point field goal team needs to be ready to roll. They need to be ready for what we would term a fire alarm field goal, where the clock is running and we are trying to run the offense off and run the field goal team on and get the ball snapped, hold, and kicked. Rushed, but not so rushed we can't execute the kick. So that's something a lot of teams practice on Thursdays or the day before a game, and that was something that we tried to do often as well. Playing without that timeout can be a little tricky. Having the timeout is just like any other play. If you can catch yourself in a couple other scenarios, fakes, different things like that on extra point field goal. But for the most part, that's what you're going to see. Those are the situations that arise in the course of a year. You got to make sure you're prepared to maximize your points on that team. So like I started out with saying, if you want to make sure, are you a team that's going to line up in offensive formations or swing and gate or something different to try to get the extra 2 points every now and then, or are you just going to run your team out there and kick? I don't think there's a wrong answer to that, but I think you start there, then you cover these scenarios, and you go from there. So hopefully that helped, and if you have any questions or if there's anything we can answer or anything we missed that you want to add to it, let us know on Twitter, on Facebook, on email, whatever you prefer. But hope that helped out, talking about extra point field goal situations.